So I would move that we approve the minutes from our January meeting, and they are linked in the chat.
A second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We have just a few announcements. Hopefully by our next meeting, we'll have some new liaisons from city departments who will be working with our board. We were hoping that they would make it today, but hopefully by next month they'll be here. So it's good.
And then about the questionnaire. Or
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. We also have some other great fun news that is it the sign up, the Greater Topeka Partnership?
Oh, right.
That one.
So last month I asked if it would be okay with everybody if we sort of pursue the idea of a green business directory that was brought forward in conversations with Washburn and the Woomester group. And I reached out to the Greater Topeka Partnership, and they were able to add a very brief piece to their membership application that sort of says, do you identify as a sustainable business? Tell us about your sustainable practices, and then can we have the Sustainability Advisory Board contact you? So that started, I think this week or the end of last week. So new members that they're signing up throughout the year will see that. And then when they do renewals, which is primarily, I guess, in the late fall, at the last quarter of the year, folks will be able to add that as they're renewing their membership too. So hopefully we'll start to get good information, and we can reach out to those folks and figure out what they're doing and how we can help share that news. So.
I think that's fabulous. That just, if nothing else, I mean, it puts it top of mind. I mean, it makes businesses think about it. So I think that's fabulous.
Right. And there's also on there a way to contact us for more information. And so, yeah, I think this is a great start. Mika and I are looking at some other cities and kind of modeling after that. And so we hope to get to a level where, you know, they actually have something that is identified on their business as, you know, a local green business or some sort of recognition for that. So that's the goal, and it's a great start. I also want to share we have, we're working on the sustainable, Mikla and I were asked to help representing the board on an Earth Day coloring book for children with the Tonantzin Society. So it's mostly supported by the Tonantzin, and we're kind of providing some guidance on the content. We have a local Indigenous artist that is going to do the artwork for this coloring book. And so right now we're kind of just, you know, coming up with the theme, and it's going to be, you know, hopefully it's going to be out on Earth Day. And we'll have acknowledgement to the board. And so that's really a great way for us to also get our name out there. And it will be digital. And so it's going to be really, it's going to be accessible to a lot of different people. Our hopes is to send it to schools and principals and see how they want to deliver it. But, you know, the goal is to have it acknowledge, you know, Topeka, and it's going to be a local acknowledgement as well as some sustainability themes. So that's really fun. And the last event I wanted to share before we get to our amazing guest speaker is about the Woomester. It's in full swing right now. I'll pop in the link here. Towards the end, I'll put the link in so you can check out all the events that Washburn has around the Woomester. And again, their theme this year is sustainability. So there's a lot of great events and tips, and I believe there's what do you call it, like like things you could do every day? Is it a contest?
They've set up, there's monthly challenges. And so right now there's a mix of students, faculty, staff, and there's a few community folks too, who are participating in those challenges. So different things all the way from I used less car travel and I opted instead for green travel, or I only ran my dishwasher when it was full. All kinds of a range of things on these challenges just to get folks who are signed up thinking more in that mindset. And the universities provided gift cards. So we just at the end of January were able to award the first gift cards to those winners. And I will say that Leilani was too humble to mention it, but she is going to be on a panel on February 10th at noon. And that is going to be about just different approaches to sustainable living. And is that a pretty fair description? And you can access the link. You can sign up through Eventbrite, or there's a Facebook event, and it'll be a Zoom presentation. So, and that's available to anyone who wants to join in. And then also the panel with Harriet Washington that we mentioned a little bit last month. That one is going to run directly on YouTube on February 18th at 2:00. Yeah, thanks, Ben.
Oh, nice.
I saw that. I'm sorry, I had trouble getting on. I'm sorry I'm a little late. I saw the challenges. They were very good. Good reminders too.
And feel free to sign up, Mary. You can sign up. So
I'm signed up for a lot of things. February 18th though.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, and if there are no additional announcements, I'm going to turn our attention over to Carol. Carol is joining us. She's representing the Kansas Permaculture Institute, and she has a little presentation for us. And so good morning, Carol. I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here today. As I was preparing this talk, I realized that Washburn is one place we don't have a connection to. We offer classes in conjunction with both KU and K-State for credit, and it could be because of the curriculum that we use. It's an international curriculum, and I realized that we've never even thought about, to my knowledge, and I've been part of the Institute almost from its beginning, we've never even thought about Washburn, and that's a big misstep on our part. So let me share my screen with you if I can here. Is that second? I'll see. I know what I need to do here. Hang on. I need to see if it's going to let me do this. That might. Do you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, we'll go into presentation mode. So this is one of the talks that several of us give to kind of get people oriented to what permaculture is and what it's not. And we call it permaculture is not just organic gardening, because permaculture is a broader discipline that includes both agricultural kinds of things, and regenerative agriculture is certainly a part of it on the larger, when it's in the larger scale. But there are also what we call social permaculture, and you'll see a little bit about that as we go along here. So I'm going to make an attempt to make these slides move. So when we talk about organic gardening, that's just basically something that most of you probably already know. It's a type of gardening where you don't use chemicals that are created from non-organic methods, and it supports the health of the plants. It supports in large part the health of the soil, but maybe doesn't focus as much on the soil as in permaculture. Permaculture is an ethics-based system of both agricultural and social design principles that it's centered around a way of looking at the patterns and the features that are in nature in your spot, and using that natural ecosystem to create a system that works for humans, for animals, and for the plant life. So it's a broader based thing. So when we look at organic gardening, I'm not sure that this is going to work, but we'll see, because my slide looks like it's just going to go. Oh, here we go. So if you have organic gardening, and my internet connection is now unstable, so if I blink out, I'll come back in. You might add some animals to it. You probably are going to use some compost. Maybe you're going to have some vermiculture there. But you can also use things that you can get commercially, like kelp meal. That's an organic method. Neem oil, an organic pesticide. And this is an organic fungicide. And you can use all those inputs in an organic garden and still have an organic garden. Permaculture is based on these three ethics. This is the core of the teaching of permaculture. Earth care, people care, so making sure that people have what they need, and what we used to call fair share. I don't have an updated version of this, but we're now beginning to call this future care. So we're looking at whether things that we do are sustainable, kind of that seventh generation mindset that things will be sustainable for generations down the road. And so we have some test questions that we use to determine whether what we're doing is permaculture. So we look at, does it regenerate the natural system and not degrade them? And that's earth care, because you can, even with organic gardening, you can degrade a system. Can this continue for 7 generations and cause no harm to natural systems? Does this support human needs? So that's people care. And is this done in a way that honors people? So another people care. And am I using only as much of this resource as is really required, based on the fair share, leaving something for the future, not taking all the fish out of the pond and not using up all of what's there? And is it possible for everyone to do the same thing? So in other words, am I able to garden organically because I have the money to go out to the gardening store and buy all these organic supplements? Is that something everybody can do? Probably not. But if we set up our system correctly, we can, that can be passed on to others. So in a permaculture system, you are probably going to have some animals, not necessarily a cow. My place is too small to support cows, but I do have chickens. And of course, in urban areas, you can sometimes have chickens. I make my own compost. We all have our compost piles out there, and I have off and on, I've done some vermiculture, but I work on the healthy soil so that the worms are out there in the soil. But I don't use these other added things once the area is established. So it may be possible, if you're starting with a really degraded piece of land, something that either is a brownfield or something that has spent years being commercially cultivated, or has been very severely compacted. You may at first need to add some inputs from outside because you don't have them available in your system yet. But once it's established, then you don't add those anymore. So in organic gardening, the system is the garden, and in permaculture, the system extends to all inputs and outputs of the garden. So our role, organic is based on conventional perspectives, so all of it relies on human inputs. But in permaculture, we try to work with what we have there to increase the fertility and the productivity of the soil over time so that there's a surplus. And if we do this in a way that is consistent for that area, so permaculture is very much as local. If we work on these natural systems, we can bring them into productivity based on what is already there. And our work is minimized by looking at what Mother Nature has already put in there. So one of the things you might notice is when you have a field that isn't taken care of for a while, even a lawn, and it reverts back to some kinds of weeds and things like that. Some of those weeds actually have certain properties, like if the area is low on nitrogen, certain kinds of weeds that fix nitrogen will actually come in there because the nature understands what it needs. And so we're trying to work with that natural thing. So you need a whole ecosystem. So if you have tomatoes, of course, the worms like to eat the tomatoes, right? And then the worms produce their castings, which you can put in the garden and have more fertility in your garden. And then the garden gives you tomatoes. And maybe the chickens eat the worms, and they actually provide you some more input for your garden. They're also really good at scratching out the bugs and things like that because they'll eat those grasshoppers and crickets. They think grasshoppers are a great snack. And then the worms will eat some of the other plants. This is a beautiful stand of comfrey. And so the problem is the solution. So we look at the first design principle is to observe and interact. So when you're looking at an area, you want to observe the patterns that are going on there. Where does the sun shine on it? From what direction? For how long in the day? Where's the water? Is there a lot of wind or a little wind in that area? Is the system out of balance because of compaction, because it's been a pathway? What's missing from this? So we look at those, we study that, and we look at what are the things we can do to bring that system back into balance. So if you have too many snails or slugs wandering around in your garden, what's the problem? They destroy your vegetables, right? So there's some solutions. Now in England, it might be bringing in some hedgehogs, but hedgehogs are not native to Kansas, so that doesn't work very well here. Toads are a good solution, and they'll eat all kinds of things. But what permaculturists usually say is, if you have a slug problem, you don't have a slug problem, you have a duck deficiency. So if you have ducks around, they'll eat the slugs, and your garden won't have any problem. So you look at what balances things out. So rather than buy some kind of a pesticide to kill off the snails, which might also affect lots of other things that you don't want to kill off, you bring in something that will deal just with that problem. So the second one, the problem needs to be fixed by human intervention, and that usually is monetary inputs. But the problem can be fixed in permaculture by replicating natural systems. And it's focused on creating that whole system, the whole beneficial system for solving the problem. So how do you grow an organic garden? Well, you know, there's lots of things. 10,000 results if you do organic gardening, Amazon Prime. 123 million results on how to start an organic garden on Google. You can get books. You can find all kinds of magazine articles and things like that. WikiHow has lots of stuff. So everybody has an opinion on how to do an organic garden. So you can see that it could get very expensive and very confusing to set this up. So in permaculture design, it's a very prescribed curriculum. We have a consistent approach with global standards. The key to that is everything is local. So I can take a look at the permaculture design standards that are globally applicable and work on a design here in Manhattan, which is very different from a design that I work on out in Great Bend, because Great Bend has really a different problem because they don't have as much moisture as we have here in Manhattan. You have even more moisture, and Lawrence has even more moisture than that, and Kansas City has even more moisture than that. So we all have different things that we need to pay attention to. So, and then we use a step-by-step approach to creating the productive systems. One of our approaches is called small and slow solutions. And that means that you take things in steps rather than trying to do things overall. One of the problems I think that many people face when looking at how to design permaculture system is what I call the HGTV syndrome. They think they're gonna put the plants in and it's gonna look like this immediately, and that's not how nature works. So nature starts off with a little bit here and a little bit there, and grows and expands. But we tend to think we want everything all at once. So I'll show you in a minute the design principles and the common approach with an infinite number of possible outcomes. So there are permaculture sites all over the globe. It started in Australia back in the 70s and has spread all over the globe. There are sites in Africa. I have a friend who wrote a curriculum for farmers in Malawi that follows the permaculture principles. So there are indigenous farmers in Malawi that are using permaculture principles, which are basically the kinds of things that were done by the indigenous folks of their region for 10,000 years. And that's the thing that we've discovered is much of the wisdom of the original settlers on a place, or the original people that lived in a place, carries over to the permaculture principles. So here are the 12 basic principles. I talked about observe and interact, and I talked about small and slow solutions, but there are many others, and this is part of our curriculum from the Permaculture Institute of North America. So the design steps, first you establish your goals, and then you evaluate what you have, and observing and paying attention to how things change over the course of a year is really important, and over the course of multiple years, because now we're seeing patterns, different changes in weather patterns. We don't normally have below zero weather the second week of February. That's usually a January thing. The last few years we've had killing frosts in April, which has not been normal for Kansas. And so we have to pay attention to what's around there. And then we apply zones of use and natural patterns and create a map of the area that we're going to look at. And when we talk about zones of use, we're talking about how to make things work so that the person who's doing this setup isn't having a lot of labor that interferes with getting stuff done easily. So we try to set things up so that everything has multiple functions, and that that the elements support each other. So having the fish pond in near to where the chickens are, so that they can drink out of the fish pond, and having the you know, it available with plants in it, so that the bees can land on the plants and use that to get some water. All of those things are part of the design elements that you use and analysis. And then you create your plan and you implement your plan, and then you learn from your mistakes. So we've all had things where we've put something in and the plant doesn't do well there. And if we're paying attention, we move that plant to some other location and see if it does better there. If you discover that you put your tomatoes in a place and then you realize that once that tree leaves out by the end of May, it shades those tomatoes, you're going to want to make those tomatoes go somewhere else. So you have to make sure that you're paying attention to things over the course of time and evolve the system. So organic gardening, there's no universal how-to, but in permaculture, there is a structure that allows people to use that to design for their local area. And that can be a backyard, or it can be a multi-acre property. So beyond food, we talk about applying these principles for how people design their house or work to make their house more efficient and comfortable. We look at it in terms of, can we generate our own power, whether it's wind power or solar power? And that's a whole other discussion that I can bring to you guys at some other time, because I'm part of the Flint Hills Renewable Energy and Efficiency Cooperative. And they do a lot of good work getting some solar power up on places. Transportation, I know you all were talking about that a little bit, but you know, are there opportunities for people using people-powered transportation like bicycles? Are there opportunities for there to be car sharing and things like that? That's part of it. And then economic systems. So some communities who have gotten very good at the permaculture design have even created their own local money. Tottenham, I think, is in England, is one that has Tottenham dollars. And Syracuse, New York is another one that has that. So they set up their own economic system to keep the money local. And I don't know if Topeka has one of those things where you can go and buy basically money that can only be used at different stores in Topeka. Manhattan has that possibility. So we look at those test questions again. Are we hitting all those things when we're designing our systems to make sure that this can be used for generations to come, and that it makes a more verdant, a more productive natural system, because we've caused the soil and the ecosystem to be able to regenerate itself and actually thrive. Okay, so we look at the ecosystem design, and we look at, how do you make a human ecosystem? This is one of our questions in when we're working with students. What makes people genuinely happy? And I think your sustainability group probably has answers to this as well, because you're with some of the things that you were talking about. But green space, meaningful work, human connections, a place to be outside and have recreation. And we know right now we have a tremendous imbalance in our human ecosystem, right? Because we're all stuck kind of inside, and we're not able to have a lot of those human connections that we all really like to have. I haven't seen some of my grandchildren for 6 months or more, a year, in one case. And so we have that. We have to see what's missing and how can we design this human system that we have in order to give people what they need to be genuinely happy. And one of the things that I think we've discovered in this pandemic is it's not necessarily stuff. That there's a lot of things that make us really happy that has nothing to do with what we have. So permaculture is actually a way to live, where organic gardening is a way to grow food. And so permaculture incorporates organic gardening in it, but it's not just that organic gardening. So questions? I went through that kind um,
I'm trying to do organic gardening, but I try to incorporate permaculture into it. But because if you're composting food, are you not growing soil too?
Yes, you are. Yeah. So if
Or
you're
composting, not just food, but
right.
all kinds of things.
So one of the things that we look at is what does your garden need to thrive, and compost might be part of it. But if you have an insect issue, what do you need to get through that? I have chickens. I live just slightly outside the city limits of Manhattan, so I have more chickens than I would have when I lived in. I had 6 chickens when I lived inside the area, and now I have 13 chickens and 2 ducks. So I don't have a duck deficiency. But you look at what are those things that you could use that would increase that productivity. And certainly, those kind of organic inputs like making your own compost are really important to that.
I wish I had a chicken, because I'm often low in nitrogen. So I do green manure, in the fall.
Uh-huh.
You can
Yeah.
turn under and make nitrogen.
Yeah.
But chicken would be a great addition for nitrogen.
So I don't know what the rules are on chickens in Topeka, but your group is the perfect kind of a group to help establish policy that allows people to have things like chickens in their backyard, or rabbits. It depends on what kinds of things people want. But frequently, especially in small rural Kansas communities, frequently have banned chickens, which I think is hilarious. But it's because when people move in off the farm into town, they don't want that farm stuff going on anymore. And so a lot of times you have to get through that older population to get them to agree for the younger folks to have chickens. And a friend of mine in Greenleaf just recently got her city commission to okay for her to have like 4 chickens. And so so sometimes that kind of policy is important. Beekeeping is another thing. Beekeeping is very it's becoming more popular here in Kansas, but again, it's a policy thing. How far away do beehives have to be from your neighbor's property and things like that. It's important for people to be able to navigate those policies in order to do these kinds of things.
Just want to throw out that you are allowed to have chickens in Topeka.
Yay!
They have to be 50 feet from the nearest neighbor, but you are allowed to have chickens in Topeka.
but that would be really difficult in a smaller lot, you know, so that means that a person's going to have a lot that's like at least 100 feet wide in order to be away from the nearest neighbor. And that's a tough one. And I know in Manhattan, you're not supposed to have roosters, but a lot of people do. And a lot of my neighbors have roosters out here. I don't currently have a rooster. My last rooster was too brutal for the hens, so he was dispatched.
And that kind of, the sizing of this is kind of my question as well. So does permaculture have size limitations? Like, so, you know, would you recommend if someone only has a small piece of, you know, front yard land or container gardening, would you like recommend organic gardening, or is it accessible for all size gardens?
It's accessible for all size gardens. There is a really good permaculture book on urban gardening called Paradise Lot, and it was two young men who bought a duplex, and each had their own side of the duplex, and they turned their whole lot into a permaculture garden. So permaculture depends a lot on perennials, and a number of places have, especially subdivisions will have covenants that prevent people from gardening in their front yards, but they don't prevent people from landscaping in their front yards. So you may not be able to put in a raised garden bed that has wooden sides and plant your things in rows, but you can use landscape design to design a front yard that has maybe fruit trees, berry bushes, low growing things like strawberries as a ground cover, other plants around. So you can, if you design your garden with an eye to how it looks in the front yard, you'll get less pushback from neighbors who think their property value is going to go down because you're actually putting rows of vegetables. Just a garden does not have to look like a farm field. You know, it can be. We have all kinds of different designs, keyhole designs, mandala designs that you can use to create a garden that's very interesting looking and adds to the beauty of the facility. And that can be done anywhere. But again, you're looking at the sun. So if your only sunny place is in the front yard, if your backyard is all in shade, you're going to need to use the front to grow vegetables. Other questions?
Yes, I have another one.
Okay.
So my question is about, you know, how weather has affected your style of gardening, permaculture. Has there been much of a change, and how have you had to adapt more frequently with the weather patterns being so unpredictable?
And I would say yes. I do have about 400-gallon water catchment that I use when things get really dry. So, you know, I have rain barrels, and I have one of those big tanks. It came from Armor Eckrich. It used to have liquid smoke in it, but it's 275 gallons, a 275-gallon tank that I use to water when things are very dry. I'll be kind of emptying those at least part way this week, because we're going to go down to into the negative temperatures, and I don't want them to crack, so I don't want them completely full. But I use that. That's one thing. Where I am, I'm susceptible to flooding because I'm out in an area in Manhattan called Hunter's Island. It's got the Kansas River on one side and Wildcat Creek on the other, and so we are susceptible to flooding. So I have to pay attention to where I plant my fruit trees so that they're not in an area of my land that gets inundated. So that's been you know, an adaptation I've had to make, and also with the chickens, because here, I'll go to my next slide because you can see a little bit of what I have. So that's just part of my orchard. I've got, I think 14 trees now, peaches, apples, cherries, I have one almond, a couple of pecans, some mulberries, and then I have another area that's brambles, that's mostly blackberries and a few raspberries. But this is at the height of the summer, where I have dispatched the chickens to work in the orchard in order to cut down the bugs. The bugs really, those, especially those Japanese beetles, really like those peaches. And so that's an adaptation. And then the house, which I realized last night that I have no new pictures of my house because it's been painted and resided since this picture was taken. But I also do have solar panels. Now I have 15 solar panels up there on my house, and I produce probably about half of the electricity I consume over the course of a year. So, and you can see one of my water tanks there. So yes, and then of course things like I was checking yesterday or the day before to see if there was enough mulch on my strawberries and my garlic to get through this this weather that we're going to have. And I think I need to add a little bit, and I have a fig tree that I need to add a little bit of mulch to help it get through this really cold weather. So I put the Kansas Permaculture Institute's website on here, and I was trying to capture it to put into the slides, but it's one of those dynamic websites, so everything moves, and so I was not able to get a really good read on that. But if you have any questions about that, please take a look at it. We do have, there's a class going on at KU right now. It's part of their environmental science curriculum. So there's a class in the spring and a class in the fall. And over the summer, we'll have a class at K-State, but it's also open to community members who will register through KPI rather than K-State. And it will be 3 weekends, 1 in June and 2 in July, to go over that 72-hour curriculum that we have. We like that 3-weekend design because it gives people a chance to kind of digest the material in between sessions, and I think it makes for better learning. So, but you know, if Washburn is interested, I'm sure we can figure out a way to incorporate them in there too. So if you know somebody there that is either in the environmental science, I doubt that it has an agriculture department, but environmental science it probably does, and we'd be interested in working with them. Any other questions? So you can make permaculture work anywhere you are if you pay attention to what's going on in that area. And we do have students who are living in apartments who are doing their permaculture in pots, and that, you know, that works as well. But you know, it's a harder thing. One of the things that's true now of all the agricultural processes is that there's a lot of young people out there who are very interested in both gardening and farming, and they don't have access to land. And that's one of the things that we really do have to begin to work on. And people can do their permaculture in whatever size lot that they had. My original site that I worked on was a lot that was about 50 by 100 in the downtown area, in the old part of Manhattan, and I had raised beds and the chickens. I didn't put bees in, but one of my neighbors had bees, so they used to come down to pollinate my area. So you can do what you have with what you know, with the materials that you have on hand. And I realized I need to take more pictures of my place because it looks
Mary,
good.
I had, did you want to share something? I know you had taken your mic off.
Question, but I know that we're running late. Do you have you heard anything about the vermiculture red wigglers becoming invasive to the natural earthworms? I heard that climate change, they usually don't survive the winters, but if they're outside, but I'm not sure we should mix them outside with our native earthworms.
It's not the red wigglers. There is an invasive worm, and I can't remember what they're called off the top of my head. They're kind of a jumping worm, and they have a darker band on them. They're the invasive species. It's not the wigglers. The wigglers, right? They're pretty susceptible to temperatures. You know, so I wouldn't worry about the wigglers so much as I would worry about, and I cannot remember what and they're like coming north from farther south, that there is an invasive worm species. I can find the name of that out and I'll send it to Leilani so that she can pass it on to you. Because I know I read something about that last year. So anyone else have a question? All right. Well, thank you for having me, and check out our website, and you can contact. Let's see. I think I put my email up there if you want to contact me about anything, and I'm happy to see that Topeka's taking an interest, and so many communities in Kansas are taking an interest in how to become more sustainable. I think that's really, really important.
Yes, thank you so much. I took so many notes, and also thank you for sharing the different course options at KU and K-State. I'll definitely share that out with the rest of the board who weren't able to make it, as well as other people I know that would be very interested in taking that training. On that note, Mikkel, is there anything else you have to add?
I just want to thank you, Carol, for joining us today. Appreciate it very much. I don't have any other announcements or anything.
Anybody else have any announcements or anything else to share? All right, going once. Okay, on that note, I will motion to adjourn the meeting.
Yep, and we'll see you on March 5th.
Thank you.
Take care.